Wonderful. So welcome everyone to our webinar today about preparing for the arrival of spotted lanternfly in Ontario. We have three great speakers with us today from Canadian Food and Inspection Agency and the Invasive Species Centre. Now, without further ado, I will just introduce our first speakers today. So we have joining us from the CFIA, Julie Holmes and Wendy Asbill. Now, Julie is the plant health survey biologist for Ontario. She works as part of the national team to design, coordinate, and administer the National Plant Health Surveillance Program for Canada, which includes target invasive species such as the spotted lanternfly. Julie provides technical training and support for operational staff and enjoys the many opportunities for collaboration and outreach with partners and stakeholders who share in the goal of protecting Canada's ecosystems from invasive species. And we're pleased as well to be joined today by Wendy Asbo, who's the National Manager for the Invasive Alien Species, Grains, and Oilseed section of the CFIA. So thank you, Julie and Wendy, for joining us. Sharing is set up there, so you should be able to take it away whenever you're ready.
Well, thanks very much for that introduction. I know we're both really pleased to be here today. We're going to give you a little bit of background as what CFI's role is in plant health surveillance. Wendy's going to provide some background on spotted lanternfly and give you an overview of what CFI is doing to prepare for its arrival. And then we're going to go over just some biology and the life cycle of the pest, as well as the different surveillance methods that we employ to survey. And we're also going to discuss some public pest reports, just the importance of that and kind of how that ties into our surveillance program. So just to start off the session, I just wanted to provide a bit more context as to who we are and why you have folks from the CFIA on your screen talking to you about spotted lanternfly in your woodlots. So the CFIA is a science-based regulator. We have a fairly broad mandate which spans food safety, animal health, plant health, as well as international market access. So within plant health, our mandate is to protect Canada's agriculture, forestry, and natural environments from invasive plant pests and different diseases, just to ensure that we have that healthy plant resource base here in Canada. So one way we do this is through regulating the movement of plants and plant products. This is both internationally as well as domestically. And then we have the Plant Protection Act and regulations, which provides us with the authority to complete that work. So I'll apologize in advance. This is the official slide of acronyms, but they are important ones. They kind of help to further explain CFI's role within surveillance. So CFIA is a signatory to the International Plant Protection Convention, or the IPPC. So that's an international treaty that acts as a standard-setting body for plant protection. So the convention sets forth a set of standards essentially to harmonize how countries apply phytosanitary measures. And they have the goal of safeguarding global food security and managing the spread of invasive pests within the international trade pathway. So it's sort of like having an international rule book to ensure that there's an equal playing field between all countries. So there's no, economic or political bias to any one country with the plant trade. So signatory countries under the IPPC they're required to put in place what's called a National Plant Protection Organization, or an NPPO, and they're responsible for coordinating the delivery of the convention. So for Canada, this is the CFIA. So one of our primary goals as an NPPO is to prevent the import and establishment of invasive species within Canada. But of course, you can't entirely just stop trade. So by putting in place safeguards, so treatment requirements, for example, prior to entry, or where that might not be possible, prohibiting the import of material from known infested areas, we can help then to reduce the risk of new species introductions through that trade pathway. So if a pest does become established, it's really important that we find it early so that we can implement the appropriate control measures to either eradicate or get rid of a pest, or to slow the spread of that pest and protect uninfested areas of Canada. So again, in order to support the work that CFI does, we have an international obligation to conduct surveillance of plant pests, and this is done under that authority of the Plant Protection Act and regulations. So I already had the introduction there, but I work within the Plant Health Surveillance Unit. And my team is responsible for designing and overseeing the National Plant Health Survey program in Canada. So we have three main goals: the detection of new populations of regulated pests, obviously, then delimiting existing populations of pests. And thirdly, we're also looking to collect data to maintain the pest-free status of an area. So simply put, if we're not actively looking for a pest, we can't say that Canada is free from it. So those negative data points are very important from a trade perspective, as they often provide us with that justification, that science-based justification that allows us to uphold import requirements on high-risk products coming into the country. So we have a number of different commodity groups that fall within plant protection, such as Wendy's group, for example, and they're responsible for balancing the need of preventing the introduction and spread of pests while facilitating international trade. So our survey data helps these groups to support their science-based policy decisions that they have to make, which govern requirements for import, export, and domestic movement of goods, which includes forestry products and nursery stock. And with that, I think I'll throw that over to Wendy.
Thank you, Julie, and I'm very happy to be here with you this afternoon. I'm presenting these slides on behalf of my colleague, Diana Moe, who is our spotted lanternfly specialist for the program in the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So I'll just give you a really short introduction to the pest and talk a little bit about what the CFIA has been doing to prepare for its arrival in Canada. So firstly, spotted lanternfly is a sapsucker. It actually prefers the tree of heaven, but it does feed on a very broad range of plant species. In fact, over 100 species of trees and plants. Feeding can cause weeping wounds in those plants. And also, while it's feeding, the spotted lanternfly produces a large amount of honeydew, and that provides a source of food for sooty mold to form, and that can impact plant growth as well as attract various other insects like stinging insects and ants. Spotted lanternfly is an insect that's native to Asia. It was first detected in North America in the United States in 2014. And it's actually thought that it first arrived on a shipment of stone in the life form of an egg mass. Those egg masses can be laid on a variety of smooth surfaces, and it's not restricted to host material. The egg masses, Julie will talk a bit more about them later, are also very difficult to detect. Spotted lanternfly is a very effective hitchhiking pest and can pretty much lay its eggs on almost any surface, including plants and things that aren't plants or plant products. There are very many pathways by which this pest can enter. And that includes nursery stock and firewood, deciduous species of logs with bark, camping gear, vehicles, marine vessels, rail cars, stone and construction material. So you can see how it is a pretty phenomenal hitchhiker and problematic because it has so many different hosts and it hitchhikes so well with its little sticky feet as an adult and in egg form. It's very challenging to predict how, when, and where they're going to move. And that is a significant challenge that we're all trying to face. I just want to point out that it's not yet established in Canada, but we're really well aware that it's really a matter of when, not if. Next slide, please. So in the United States, this pest has proven to be a really serious pest of grapes. It's also a nuisance pest to the public due to the sheer number of insects that might be present when there are high population densities flying around and landing on people and disrupting events and so on. In Canada, the areas at highest risk for spotted lanternfly establishment are southern Ontario, parts of southern Quebec, and the interior of British Columbia. And coincidentally, these are also the major grape growing regions of Canada. And that's significant because spotted lanternfly loves grapes, and the grape growing areas could be seriously affected by this pest. In fact, recent economic figures suggest that wine and grape industry contributes about $11.5 billion to the Canadian economy. So it's a significant concern. Spotted lanternfly spends the majority of its time on plants, and material like nursery stock and logs represent a risk for the movement of spotted lanternfly. Now, there have been some impacts to some species of young saplings, such as black walnut, for example, and there are some general impacts noted to plant growth associated with the accumulation of sooty mold. Spotted lanternfly is not considered a forest pest. It's not the same as something like emerald ash borer or Asian longhorn beetle would be. And on U.S. experience, they haven't observed significant impacts of spotted lanternfly to the forest sector. So again, spotted lanternfly can feed on many species of trees and plants, but significant impacts have only been observed on grape and its preferred host, tree of heaven. So we've been able to benefit from the unfortunate situation in the United States. They have been impacted by spotted lanternfly since 2014, when it came to Berks County in Pennsylvania. Because they have had this pest for over 10 years, we've been able to work really closely with our colleagues in the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service in the United States to understand their approach, the challenges they face, and the considerations that they've made for how they deal with spotted lanternfly. And that's been really useful for us in developing our Canadian preparedness plan. And it's really unusual for us to have this opportunity to prepare for a pest this much in advance so that we're ready for when it comes. So, since being detected in 2014, spotted lanternfly has spread throughout the U.S. To 19 U.S. states that are now considered infested. It is a pest that's managed at the state level. There's not a federal quarantine put in place, but several states have put state level measures in place to attempt to slow the spread of spotted lanternfly. The U.S. also has a broad range of chemical treatment options available for non-agricultural and agricultural areas. However, despite the availability of treatments and all the response efforts in the U.S., there's never been a successful eradication of spotted lanternfly reported. Spotted lanternfly spread continues, and spotted lanternfly impacts continue to be observed. And as mentioned previously, the largest impacts have been observed on grapes. In U.S. vineyards, they have observed reduced grape quality and yield loss, sometimes up to 90%, and in some cases, death of grapevines. Next slide, please. So, what have we been doing in the Canadian Food Inspection Agency? Well, since the detection in the United States, we've been really working hard to delay the introduction of spotted lanternfly, while at the same time preparing to respond to any detections and slow the spread once it establishes. We added spotted lanternfly to the regulated pest list for Canada in 2018, and began raising awareness about this pest, not only with our traditional plant stakeholders, such as the nursery, fruit industry, um, forestry industry, invasive species councils, and so on, but also with non-traditional industries in the transportation and import sectors, because, as I mentioned, it's a terrific hitchhiker and is likely to get here by many different means. We also began collaborating with government, industry, and invasive species groups to slow the introduction and spread. So some collaborative groups focused on spotted lanternfly have been established. We have a national technical advisory committee made up of government and industry members. We work bilaterally with the United States and work really closely with the provinces, including the province of Ontario. We've established requirements to slow the introduction. We've also conducted early detection, and that includes inspection of plant and non-plant goods. We have a national surveillance program that Julie will be talking about, and responding to public reports. So with the many ways this pest can enter Canada and the many hosts that it can feed on, spotted lanternfly can enter almost anywhere, and public reports have been and will continue to be essential. In terms of response and treatment, we do have a CFIA operational response plan to guide our inspectors. We've worked with government and industry partners to have pest control products proactively registered. And the CFIA has also now prepared a response framework to provide predictability and transparency for our stakeholders and partners. And we anticipate publishing this later in the summer. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we do have some import and domestic requirements for spotted lanternfly. These are published in our spotted lanternfly directive. The QR code is at the bottom of the slide, and this outlines the requirements that must be met to import from areas infested with spotted lanternfly in the United States. Everything coming into Canada must be free from spotted lanternfly prior to entry. That is the overarching requirement. And we do have specific requirements for nursery stock and deciduous logs with bark. So that's certification or an import permit. And I just want to point out that nursery stock includes plant material like grapevines and fruit trees. And we've also taken a really unique approach of proactively publishing domestic requirements. And those are requirements that will be implemented once spotted lanternfly is considered to have established in Canada and regulated areas are established. And just by definition, regulated areas are those areas where the pest is considered established for the foreseeable future. Next slide, please. So if the history of detection in Canada follows that of the United States, the first detection will likely be in an urban environment or areas with a lot of traffic from infested areas of the United States. However, because of the many ways that this pest can be introduced, it could show up anywhere. So key elements for how the CFIA will respond to spotted lanternfly are outlined in our spotted lanternfly risk management document that we published in 2023. And that outlines the risk management plan for responding to a detection and to an established population. So the QR code at the bottom right will take you to that document. And as I mentioned, we've drafted a response framework, and that framework builds on the RMD and provides additional information on the CFIA's planned response, including elements like the proposed size of an initial regulated area once we have an established population. So this flowchart provides a visual representation of the approach the CFIA plans to take, the points at which decisions will be made, the kinds of information that goes into making those decisions, the tools that are available, and when we would move to establishing a regulated area and implementing those domestic requirements. So once spotted lanternfly is confirmed to have been detected, a few things will happen. The CFIA's operational response plan will be implemented. There will be delimitation surveys conducted, and our communication plan will be implemented. One of our first steps, of course, is to understand what we're dealing with. We need to determine, for example, what life stages are present. Are they adults? Are they nymphs? Are they egg masses? The size and extent of the population. Was it found early, or is there evidence that it's been in the environment for a while and this may be an established reproducing population? Delimitation surveys are the first step in getting the information needed to make decisions about the next steps. Once we have that information about the population, the CFI would consider whether further spread could be prevented and if we need to apply some kind of initial containment and suppression measures. That might mean short-term regulatory control, such as movement controls. It might include knockdown treatments that could be applied while the CFI determines whether eradication is feasible. And just to note that regulatory control measures at this stage would be applied on an individual property level to prevent spotted lanternfly from spreading from that detection site. For detection, if eradication is considered possible, treatment may be ordered, and the CFIA would subsequently conduct follow-up surveys to confirm if it was successful. We would also look at any pathways that might be associated with the detection and consider next steps for that pathway. Do we need additional outreach? Are there other locations that need surveillance? If the follow-up indicates that eradication was not successful, we could consider if there are other treatment options that would be likely to give a different outcome. If it's not successful and another treatment's not likely to give a different outcome, we would move to the establishment of regulated areas and implementing our domestic requirements as outlined in our Directive D2401. If there's evidence that the population is established, so a reproducing population likely to be present for the foreseeable future, the CFIA response would shift from surveillance and ordering treatment to establishing a regulated area and the implementation of the domestic requirements as outlined in the directive. And again, all things need to be free from spotted lanternfly before moving out of that regulated area, and there are specific requirements for nursery stock and logs. Next slide. So over the past few years, we've been conducting numerous activities, and those are certainly continuing in this current year. And that includes inspection of products coming from infested U.S. states. Inspectors are really well trained on how to identify the various life stages of spotted lanternfly and ensure that they're looking for this pest during all inspections. And that includes plant commodities like nursery stock, as well as non-plant commodities like conveyances and imported goods that might harbor those hitchhikers. In terms of surveillance, we use a number of strategies in our approach, and Julie will discuss those in greater detail shortly. These activities focus on areas at high risk of spotted lanternfly introduction, and we're working cooperatively with partners such as the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness to coordinate delivery and ensure that we're using our limited survey resources efficiently and maximize coverage in those higher risk areas. In addition to our formal surveys, the CFI continues to respond to the many pest reports that we receive from the public, and we ensure on-site follow-up of visits are prioritized and completed. And again, to date, while there have been specific public reports, spotted lanternfly has not yet been detected in Canada. And of course, outreach and education to increase awareness of this pest and equip members of the public in the identification of the pest is a critical piece in all of this. As the more people with awareness of this pest increases, the higher our chances are going to be to detect it early after its arrival so we can figure out our next steps. And with that, I'll turn it back to Julie.
Thanks so much, Wendy. And so yeah, now I'll take over. We're going to go through the biology and life cycle of the pest and talk a bit about surveillance. So spotted lanternfly has one generation per year. It's univoltine. The egg masses are laid from September to November, and they measure about 1 inch to 1.5 inches long. The insect actually overwinters as an egg mass before hatching the following spring. So intact egg masses, as well as spent egg masses or masses from which nymphs have emerged, could be visible year-round. So that's important to note. First instar nymphs emerge as early as April, and they're approximately 1/4 of an inch long, so they're fairly small. After hatching, they'll go in search of a host where they'll feed using those specialized mouth parts. They pierce through the plant tissue and then feed on the phloem of young herbaceous plant tissue. They'll then feed and develop, reaching their third instar between June and July. So fourth instar nymphs might be present from July to September, and they're a little bit bigger. They measure 3/4 of an inch long. Then adults, they're about an inch long, bigger obviously than the nymphs. Also, females are also a little bit larger than males, so there is some variation in size. So they can be found from July onwards to December, or until they're killed off by a hard frost. So spotted lanternfly, as Wendy mentioned, will feed on a broad range of species, although it generally prefers that invasive tree of heaven. It will also feed on grapes, hops, and a lot of other hardwood species, including maple, oak, black walnut, willow. Conifers are not considered to be hosts of this insect. And another interesting fact is that populations can kind of transiently feed on plants that aren't considered to be hosts. So they've been found feeding in crops such as corn, soybean fields for very short periods of time. And spotted lanternfly nymphs have also been found feeding on basil, cucumber, and even grass, though none are obviously a preferred food source. It's thought that they're kind of feeding just to get the energy needed to move on to a more preferred host as they're migrating. So their feeding habits really do change with their life stage as well. So the beaks of first, second, and third instar nymphs, they're not very strong, so they're not able to penetrate woody tissue, and they'll primarily feed on things like annual plants, as well as the current year's growth in perennial plants, so that kind of green tissue that's easy to pierce. So it's only when they get into their fourth instar nymphal stage, and then as adults, that they have those stronger beaks and they're able to penetrate the trunks of trees and older woody parts of other perennial plants. So this is important to note, just to keep in mind the time of year that you're completing a visual survey or out looking for spotted lanternfly in order to prioritize the likely hosts and plant types that you might be seeing them on. In addition, you'll kind of see that's from the photos here, but both nymphs and adults frequently tend to gather in large numbers when they're feeding. So the eggs themselves, they look like little seeds, and they're laid in 4 to 7 vertical rows. And so one egg mass can contain anywhere from 30 to 50 eggs. So you can see that in the photo kind of to the left, an uncovered mass. So once laid, the female covers them in this waxy white, almost like creamy colored coating, which then fades to a more of a gray putty color. And it almost has like a bit of a glossy sheen to it. And then over time, as they age, the egg masses become weathered. They'll turn to this muddy brown, and they really do look like a smear of mud almost at that point. So that really can make detection quite challenging, especially if you're looking at that against like the bark of a host tree. So these eggs are also often laid in more protected areas of the tree, like on the underside of the branch or in little crotches, which then further impedes detection. And as Wendy mentioned, they'll lay their eggs on just about any smooth, hard surface. So items in the surrounding environment, like tires, camping equipment, they really like rusted metal, can all be suitable substrates for egg mass laying in addition to the hosts. So once those eggs hatch, the early instar nymphs have these little black bodies with white spots on them. In terms of their body and kind of how they sit, they almost look like little puppies, kind of sitting up on their hind legs. I think they're a little bit cute, but if I'm allowed to say that. As they develop through their second and third instars, they're pretty much the same in terms of their shape and coloration, but they just get larger in size. So it's when the nymph develops into its fourth and final instar, that's when it's taking on that reddish coloration with those like high contrast black and white spots on its body. You can also see the development of these like very tiny little wing buds on their thorax or on their back. And then adults in comparison look drastically different from the nymphal stage as they've developed these large, kind of intricately patterned wings with a spotting on the forewing. And then the hind wings, you can see a photo there. They're red with these black and white markings. So when they open their forewings, there's this kind of bright flash of red that appears. So the adults and the fourth instars, I guess in contrast to those cryptic egg masses, they're really quite showy. So between, say, July and the first frost is probably going to be the period of time when you're most likely to notice the insect, just due to the coloration. Earlier on, Wendy had also mentioned the production of honeydew as the insect's feeding. So I did get a chance to visit the site, an infested site in Buffalo, New York, and just standing under a tree, it was just like it was raining down honeydew, which I know is kind of gross, but it's also kind of neat at the same time. But you will see like the nearby foliage is almost like sparkling with the honeydew and the light, and you can really see it just kind of covering everything. And then again, that's providing that suitable substrate for sooty mold to then develop. And you can also see kind of the presence of stinging insects flying around where there's lots of honeydew present as well. So in terms of lookalikes, I think the one that we get the most reports about would be box elder bug, as well as the red firebug or European firebug. Some other insects that might be confused with SLF are brown marmorated stink bug nymphs, which to the untrained eye could look similar to an early instar nymph. As well as milkweed beetles, they're red just due to their coloration, as well as tiger moths who have a similarly colored hindwing. In terms of egg masses, spongy moth egg masses can kind of look somewhat similar. You can see a picture in the middle there with an SLF mass on the upper left and spongy moth to the bottom. I've also received photos of like a mud dauber, wasp's nest, that sort of thing where people have confused that with an SLF egg mass. So I always say, if you're not 100% sure if it's SLF or not, just, if it's a mobile insect, collect it and send in a photo. So it's exactly what we're here for. Please send that in. We're happy to take a look for you. So while this might not have been documented in the literature, it does look like spotted lanternfly is a nocturnal species. But yeah, jokes aside, the attention that this pest has received really speaks to how its like showy appearance and presence in these urban areas in really high numbers makes it such a notable pest. So it's drawn significant public attention in the US, and it's appeared on The Tonight Show, The Late Show, SNL, and Jimmy Kimmel Live. And to quote the words of Bowen Yang, I even look gorgeous dead. So, this really is a unique and beautiful insect. In all likelihood, detection of an established population will likely result from a report from, an observant member of the public who comes across this pest in the urban landscape. Really highlights the need and the value of public outreach to equip landowners and members of the public to recognize the pest and report all sightings to the CFIA. So just to end off this slide and avoid any misinformation, SLF is not nocturnal. They are sometimes easier to see at dusk, just as they migrate up and down the trees. But yes, not nocturnal. They'll often tend to cluster in the day when they're feeding. So, in complement, or I guess I'll talk about our surveillance techniques now. So we have two different, I guess, components of our detection surveys. So we have our summer detection survey. So this is our main spotted lanternfly survey, which takes place in the summer months, just to overlap with the window where nymphs and adults are going to be the most active on the landscape. So these surveys include both a trapping as well as a visual component. So monitoring efforts are kind of ongoing throughout this window. We target preferred hosts, so tree of heaven, as well as others, grapes, hops, black walnut, maple, and oak. We focus on high-risk sites and pathways through which spotted lanternfly is going to be the most likely to be introduced. So you'll kind of want to place those sites in the highest risk areas. So your commercial transportation pathways, forested areas and vineyards that are really close to US infestations, sites that might be associated with travel or tourism for people coming over from the US and might have hitchhikers attached. And we also focus on areas with previous interceptions that have been reported by the public. And then at each site, we deploy traps that remain in the field from early May to the end of September. And we also complete a visual survey of hosts over, a 200-meter span across the site, either July or September, which I'll talk about in the next couple of slides. So at each trapping or at each survey site, we establish one trap using this bug barrier tree band sticky band trap. So it's important to note that this is, no means is by no means is this silver bullet in terms of traps. So we don't have, an effective pheromone or chiromone that we can use as a detection tool at this point in time. Instead, these sticky bands are more acting as a passive trap to monitor the risks, to monitor high-risk hosts, and it will catch the insect as it's kind of migrating up and down the tree. So we really do rely on visual survey methodologies as a complement to the traps at every site. So the traps themselves are placed between 1 and 2 meters from the ground, biasing towards tree of heaven. When the inspectors are placing the traps, we're obviously trying to get them as close to a possible, high-risk pathway or anticipated introduction point as we possibly can. We also try to overlap trap deployment with when, SLF might be active within the environment. So again, they're going out in May, we have a mid-season trap check, and then they're pulled from the field in September. And while we're out checking those traps, we take a look for any potential nymphs like you could see in this trap here. So when we're on site to do our visual survey, we'll visually inspect 30 hosts within a 200-meter span of the survey point. And hosts are just randomly selected to ensure even distribution at the site. So this is conducted typically between July and September. And obviously you're still looking at hosts for signs and symptoms while you're on site during your trap placement, but timing the full visual survey probably in late September would be a good choice, just because there's more visible life stages present at this time of year. So this time also coincides with the time of year that we're seeing an influx of public reports of this pest, as those fourth instar nymphs and adults are just very showy stages of the pest. So if you're on site completing a survey, you're going to walk around the tree, scan the entire surface of the tree, and you can use binoculars to scan the upper canopy. So spotted lanternfly really can be anywhere in the tree. You also want to take into consideration life stages. So with early instar nymphs, you're probably more likely to find them feeding on, the underside of leaves or on that like herbaceous stems of plant in the new growth, kind of as shown in this first video that we just saw there. And then the second video, you can see that the mature adults are feeding on the bole and the branches of the stem as we get further up in the tree. You can also see examples of the weeping from those feeding wounds. And again, there's going to be that the honeydew present, which then can produce sooty mold. So of course, you're scanning the surface of the ground and nearby structures, in addition to the host trees, for evidence of any life stages. And as we learn, different life stages have different feeding habits. So inspectors are always mindful, of where SLF is expected to be in its life cycle, anywhere from first instar to adult, not only to refine their search image for the appropriate life stage, but also, again, biasing the selection of vegetation towards, where that life stage is most likely going to be feeding at that time. So in this video, you can kind of see that when you look up into the tree, you expect your regular tree silhouette, but you can see these little silhouettes of spotted lanternfly on the branches. So that's one thing to kind of cue in when you're doing your visual inspection by binocular. And they really can be like clustered at the base of the tree, as well found further up as well in quite large numbers. So next we have our fall and winter egg mass surveys. So we utilize a national grid-based visual survey to detect Asian longhorn beetle. And with that survey, we also have an added spotted lantern module within that. So this survey runs October to December following leaf off and often stretches into the winter months as we need dry days with no snow cover to complete the survey. So we focus on major urban centers where the risk of introduction through that international wood packaging pathway is going to be the greatest, and we inspect these locations on a 5-year rotation. So given the overlap in site types at risk of introduction for both the Asian longhorn beetle as well as spotted lanternfly, so in the urban area, you've got your commercial transportation corridors, ports, tourism hotspots, etc. That spotted lanternfly module is definitely a complement to this survey. So to do these surveys, we have a triangular grid, which is overlaid across the target city. And then at each grid point, we're inspecting 30 maple trees, or where no maples are present, we look at willow, poplar, birch, and elm. So inspectors are examining the entire tree with the aid of binoculars to get into that upper canopy, but they're also paying close attention to the base of the tree and ground level, mainly looking for egg masses or any potential life stages that might be present on the ground. Which are most likely going to be dead at that time of year that they're doing ALHB surveys. So for spotted lanternfly, in addition to the maple, we're also examining any tree of heaven on site and scanning the immediate area around hosts. So I've got a couple more videos here. Eggs, as I mentioned, can be found year round. So just wanted to remember to keep in mind that they can look slightly different when they're freshly laid and covered with that kind of white waxy coating. Then again, that turns to a muddy brown color over time. And then you've got spent egg masses where that coating has come off. The nymphs have emerged, and you'll see that tiny little hole within each egg where the insect has come out. So just to remind you of that progression of egg masses there. Egg masses can be visible anywhere on the tree, but again, typically found in sheltered areas, like the underside of horizontal branches, like you saw in the video there. So make sure you're thoroughly looking in those kind of hard to reach places as well. And then adults can be found anywhere on the tree, but they're typically killed by that first hard frost. So again, as giving the timing of the survey, as I mentioned, adults are probably going to be found more in the leaf litter surrounding the tree. You can kind of see there, I'm just picking one out of the leaf litter. And if you take a look at the photo on the left as well, they can also remain attached to the tree. Like if they die when they start feeding, or when they're in the middle of feeding, they can just kind of attach until they're eventually weathered and they fall off. So just to give you the results from last year's surveys, we had no detections of spotted lanternfly through our winter egg mass surveys last year. So we looked at 725 individual sites. And again, we're planning to do the same for 2026. And then in terms of our summer surveys, we established 26 sites across Ontario, which are denoted by those green triangles. And you can also see green dots. You'll see that we've prioritized areas such as Essex County and the Niagara region. Those are in close proximity to known populations within the US, and they've been associated with increased sightings and interceptions of the pest. So Wendy already made this very clear, but just wanted to reiterate, we have not had any detected populations of spotted lanternfly in Ontario or Canada, and for that matter. But you will see those various red dots on the map. So those represent sightings and interceptions of spotted lanternfly that have been reported to CFI by the public, as well as CBSA. So in all cases, our inspectors have followed up and completed on-site surveys and didn't identify any active populations in the immediate surroundings. So for the most part, these reports can be linked to the transportation pathway. As we know, SLF is an excellent hitchhiker. So late summer to fall is typically going to be the time of year where we receive an influx of reports of this pest, but we've certainly seen a year-over-year increase in the number of reports that we've received. As well, we've seen an increase in the number of live interceptions of the pest, predominantly in that Windsor area. So this is definitely an area to watch. So this year we've set another 26 sites across Ontario to continue monitoring. And I did want to note that we do have a listing of all the observations received through those public reports. So that's available online. The QR code is available there. We've already had a couple of interceptions this year, or interceptions and sightings rather. So March, we had a couple of, several dead adults that were found kind of shrink wrapped in just a shipment of empty plant pots. And then most recently, we've had 2 nymphal sightings in Windsor in June and July. So that's certainly a concern, as a nymph present in the environment is certainly more indicative of an established population. So we are ongoing doing survey or follow-up surveys in those locations. And to date, we haven't detected a reproducive population in the area. So we certainly expect to see kind of an increase in observations reported over the next couple of months. So just to touch on public pest reports, it's a good point to highlight, we receive hundreds of pest reports each year. Anytime you suspect that you might have found a regulated pest outside of its known distribution, this needs to be reported to the CFIA for follow-up. So as I mentioned earlier, even if you're not 100% sure, just reach out looking for a second opinion. We're happy to field your inquiries. So photos are very important to include within your report. But what's also important is if there's a mobile stage of that insect, please catch that insect. Do what you can to grab it. You can secure it in like just a sealed container or a Ziploc bag, pop it in the freezer, and then wait for CFIA follow-up. There's a multitude of ways that you can report. You can go direct through our CFIA website, always contact a local office, or we have our CFIA surveillance account where you can reach us directly. We do report or prefer to have our reports sent directly to us, but there are also apps like iNaturalist and EdMaps that facilitate easy reporting with the touch of a screen. And just to kind of close off that gap, we do have mechanisms in place to monitor those reporting mechanisms. So for example, through our AI lab, we've established a daily email alert, which provides us with a summary of observations that have been entered into iNaturalist the previous day. So it pulls specific pests based on a pre-established watch list, and we're scanning these reports on a daily basis. So this kind of just further enhances our capacity to respond to sightings in real time. So in Ontario, we receive hundreds of pest reports each year. They all get reviewed, triaged, and responded to. I've just shown a screenshot here of some of the more concerning reports from Ontario that we've received through this email account. So these reports are, a good representation of the various pathways through which spotted lanternfly can be introduced. So this includes finds on, commercial transport vehicles. You can see one in the grill of a truck there. Finds on imported plants, shipping vessels, border crossings, as well as some natural areas that are in close proximity to the US and to tourist destinations. So I think this has been a common theme throughout the presentation, but just really wanted to underscore the importance of outreach and education in facilitating awareness of invasive species and also in fostering cooperation and in reporting suspect finds. So it's well documented in the literature, and the invasion curve, shows that prevention is really the most cost-effective strategy in combating invasives. So stopping them before they even arrive. But then when a pest does establish, there's typically a very limited window where eradication could be possible, or even where control efforts can be effective. So as populations grow, efforts then have to shift to controlling the spread through measures such as ministerial orders, regulated areas that Wendy mentioned, which are then aimed at preventing the human-mediated introductions to further areas within Canada. They're not yet infested. So once a pest is widely distributed, control measures might become less effective, management costs are highest, so early detection really is critical once a spotted lanternfly does get here. So what can you do to help? Step one is, being here on this webinar to gain an understanding of how to identify spotted lanternfly. So having that awareness while you're out working in your woodlot so that you can effectively identify suspects and then know where to report these to if and when you come across them. For those of you who might be interested in completing like a formal visual survey on your property, we do have a survey protocol available. The QR code is shown there. So you can actually complete the surveys and then submit your data to us through a Survey 123 app. So then we're aware of your survey efforts, and we also include our partner data within our annual survey reports. So you can be part of the national surveillance efforts for spotted lanternfly. Another thing you can do is log Tree of Heaven and iNaturalist. So this helps just to, create an inventory of spotted lanternfly, which then helps us with site selection for future surveys. And lastly, but most importantly, please report all suspect finds of spotted lanternfly to us. So if you're looking for some additional resources, we do have a number of products available. So if you need like pest cards or something like that, we even have some tattoos. Please feel free to reach out to me. I can send those out to you. In addition, we also have resources on our website, like our pest fact sheet and some printable information sheets. Another one I want to highlight is the Invasive Species Center. They have a great website. I often refer people to that as like a one-stop shop for information, which I'm sure they'll be highlighting further for you as well. And with that, I just want to thank you for your time, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions that don't get answered during the Q&A.
That was wonderful. Thanks so much, Julie, and thanks to Wendy as well. That was very, very comprehensive. As you bring up the Invasive Species Center, I'll just switch over to introducing Sophie. So Julie, if you don't mind, yeah, thanks, closing down your screen. Sophie, I'll just invite you to queue up your slides next. Now, Sophie is the Terrestrial Programs and Outreach Coordinator at the Invasive Species Center, where she is currently coordinating forest pest outreach and events and initiatives. She has worked and studied with both terrestrial and aquatic ecology in a variety of settings over the past 6 years. Today, Sophie will be telling us about the Invasive Species Center's work and resources, as well as actions that members of the public can take to maintain forest health. So thanks, Sophie. I see that your slides are up, so you're ready to go.
All right, perfect. Can you hear me all right? Not too quiet?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so thanks so much to the Ontario Woodlot Association for having us today, and thanks, Olivia, for that introduction. As mentioned, my name is Sophie Anderson. I'm the Terrestrial Programs and Outreach Coordinator here at the Invasive Species Center. I'm here today on behalf of Emily Postrero, who is our resident SLF expert. So I'll do my best to be able to answer all questions, but if there's anything remaining at the end that maybe I can't answer, she's given me her permission to put her email in the chat, and she says feel free to reach out with any further inquiries. So this will be a really kind of short presentation today, just to kind of go through some of the current work and resources towards spotted lanternfly that we have available at the Invasive Species Center. So kind of our two main goals to address SLF at the Invasive Species Center kind of focus on preparedness and collaboration. Preparedness being, being ready for the future potential spotting of SLF, and collaboration with other networks and organizations to kind of spread awareness. So first of all, the Invasive Species Center participates in a number of federal and provincial spotted lanternfly committees. I'll get into that a little bit further in a few slides. We also have crisis communications that are ready to go. We kind of try to keep these documents updated and revised as any kind of new research and information comes in. So these are ready to go in case of any future SLF detection. The Invasive Species Center is also working on a few municipal preparedness packages, specifically targeting communities in kind of the more high priority areas in Southern Ontario. And we also host a number of SLF specific workshops. So since 2022, I think we've tried to do on average 2 to 5 spotted lanternfly workshops per year. And these are mostly in affected areas, well, priority areas in Southern Ontario, so places like Windsor, Niagara, Prince Edward County, but we've also done workshops in other areas like Ottawa, where I'm coming from to you today. So it's not just affected areas. Like if there's any interest in having a spotted lanternfly workshop, you are always welcome to reach out to the Invasive Species Center, and we'll see what we can do. We also try to do numerous tabling events to kind of raise awareness for spotted lanternfly, and these take place at kind of a number of community events, which I'll get into in a moment. So just quickly to go over some of the spotted lanternfly committees. I know Julie and Wendy went over a few in their presentation, so I won't spend too long here, but it's just to emphasize the fact in our preparedness approach, we really try to be involved in as many spotted lanternfly committees as possible, both on the federal and provincial level. So on the federal level, there's the Spotted Lanternfly Technical Advisory Committee, and this group meets approximately twice a year and it is led by the CFIA. But within this committee, there's also the Communications Sub-Working Group, of which ISC is a member, and the Science Advisory Panel, of which we are, I think, the Secretariat. So these two subcommittees kind of relay information to the TAC, both in terms of communication strategies and also in terms of, if there's any scientific advancements in research related to spotted lanternfly biologies, mechanisms of spread, control and management strategies, or if there's any underlying kind of research gaps that need to be addressed, this all gets communicated to the higher TAC advisory group. The ISC is also on a number of provincial committees. This includes the Ontario Critical Plant Pest Management Committee, Spotted Lanternfly Specific Task Force, which is quite a mouthful there. So we're a member of that committee and also the Spotted Lanternfly Education and Outreach Committee, which meets fairly frequently. And this last committee I mentioned is really great for members who may not have access to the federal committee or be involved in any of the other kind of higher up committees. It's a great place to share resources, kind of help cross promote spotted lanternfly events, and share anecdotes and communication strategies. So if there's any interest in joining the Spotted Lanternfly Education Outreach Committee, please reach out to myself or Emily. So now just getting a little bit into some of the tabling events. As I mentioned, we tend to try to highlight some of the more high priority areas. So for example, we have a lot of tabling events at events such as the Oshawa Garden Club Plant Sale, Landscape Ontario Congress, Guelph Bug Day, Ontario Horticultural Association Convention. You can see my colleague Emily is in all of these, our resident SLF expert. And these tabling events are really great because they provide members of the public an opportunity to speak with an expert. They can also examine 3D models and SLF specimens up close. It's really a passive form of outreach, but you can really reach a great number of people, including a lot of like families and kids who happen to be at these events anyway. We have lots of like stickers and tattoos and fact sheets and stuff. So it's really great for members of the public or even members of horticultural clubs and other organizations to get to speak with an expert and kind of see SLF up close and learn how to identify it. Now, some of the key resources we have on the website, like Julie was mentioning. So we have quite an elaborate species profile for both spotted lanternfly and its host, Tree of Heaven. So if you have any interest in learning more about these species following this webinar, I'd encourage you to kind of take a look at some of these species profiles. They're quite extensive and they're sorted by various categories. So if you're interested in learning about management, there's a category there. If you're interested in learning about kind of its life cycle, there's a category there. So they're updated regularly and quite elaborate. So they're really great sources of information just on our website. We also have spotted lanternfly posters and fact sheets in both English and French, and more recently, a Landscape Ontario resource in Spanish, which is exciting. So those are all free to download and print and share. We have bilingual metal signage available. I'm going to talk about that in a slide or two, so I'll save that for now, but that is one of the resources we have available. And then finally, we also have an online course. So that's kind of pictured here to the right, which is the Spotted Lanternfly training course. And if for those of you interested, it's a free course, it's virtual, it's self-paced, which means you don't have to do it all in one sitting. You can kind of do it whenever you like. And you can also obtain continuing education units or CEUs from the Ontario Certified Crop Association or the ISA upon completion of this course. So if that's something I'd be interested in, that's just on our website under training. It's a really great resource. I actually took the course when I first started at the Invasive Species Center just to become a bit more familiar with, spotted lanternfly and its biology. And it's really quite elaborate and goes over things in detail. So I would recommend if that's something that is of interest. So we offer not just spotted lanternfly training courses, but many invasive species. I think we have a forest pest specific one, which may be of interest to some of you if you're interested in kind of more forest pests and forest health side of things. Not all of them are free, but the spotted lanternfly specific one is entirely free. So I encourage you to check that out on our website if it's of interest. So now just getting back to the signs that I mentioned earlier. So we have bilingual public signage, as you can see here pictured on the left. So we currently have 56 signs that are placed at strategic areas. So locations with high foot traffic that can include places like, trails, parks, wineries, tree nurseries, or areas of high density host plants. So if there's a lot of tree of heaven or black walnut in the area, that's where we'll kind of focus on putting some of these signs. We have a file available to print your own signs, or you can reach out to myself or Emily if you're interested in obtaining them. We are planning on printing more in the near future. Another resource that we have is our monthly webinar. Now, we focus these webinars on a variety of invasive species. So we have experts coming in from academia, from the government, from nonprofits, so experts to speak on various invasive species topics. But so far, we've had two spotted lanternfly specific talks. So one from Robert Miller from the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development on Michigan's response to spotted lanternfly, and then one by Anna Turblin from the Great Lakes Forestry Center on kind of looking at the lower temperature thresholds of spotted lanternfly. So these are on our YouTube channel and can be watched at any point. Our webinar series, I think, is really a great chance. If ever there's a detection of spotted lanternfly or new research becomes available, this would be a great kind of way to spread information since we have quite a big audience population. So if any of this seems of interest, I encourage you to visit our website, which is posted here. We also have quarterly newsletters, biweekly media scans, and event and webinar invitations. Again, not all of that will be spotted lanternfly specific, but we do have a lot of things related to forest pests too, which may be of interest. So if that sounds good, our website is right there, and there's lots of resources available. So I just wanted to thank you all so much for listening today. That's all I have. Happy to take any questions. And if I can't answer them, I'm sure my colleague Emily can be reached by email. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sophie. That was great. If I missed this, so just about some resources. So this webinar is being recorded, so we'll be sharing it with folks after the fact. So if anyone needs to get going now, that's fine. I'll also just wrap things up as it is past 1 o'clock, and folks can get back to their lunches, get back to work. But I really want to thank Julie, Sophie, and Wendy for joining us today, as well as the preparation that Diana had done. Really appreciate it. We'll be sharing the webinar recording with folks in the next couple of days, and we'll share that contact information as well if anyone has any follow-up questions there. I just wanted to share as well that so our organization, the OWA, the Ontario Woodlot Association, we can only offer these educational opportunities because of our members as a membership-based nonprofit. So if you're looking for, so if this is the first time that you've heard about the OWA, that you've joined us for a webinar, we encourage you to take a look at the resources we have available on our website, specifically geared more towards woodlot and forest management, and consider becoming a member to support our work. You can find that in the email that we sent you to register, and I will just pop it in the chat here as well. But thank you, everybody, again. And to our speakers, there's lots of thanks there in the chat. So thank you, everybody, again, and we hope you have a good rest of your afternoon.